Wrongful convictions are an inherent side effect of an imperfect judicial system. For those that were wrongfully convicted and are able to prove their innocence, compensation can help lessen the pain felt after exoneration and help make their lives less difficult. However, it can also serve as a tool for keeping public officials liable for misconduct.
He may have given up hope, but Juan Johnson's lawyers never did. Johnson was 19 when he was sentenced to a 30-year prison term for a 1989 Humboldt Park murder he says he didn't commit. 5 years ago, a jury acquitted him in a retrial, and today, a federal jury awarded Johnson with the largest wrongful conviction jury award in Chicago history.
Meet Juan Johnson. He was framed by a known dirty detective for a murder he did not commit. As a result, Juan spent 11 years in prison. Wrongful convictions happen more than one would think. According to the National Registry of Exonerations, there have been 2,280 exonerations since 1989. Exonerees have spent a combined total of 20,080 years behind bars. Many more are wrongfully convicted and still in prison. But of these 2,280 people, less than half have received any form of compensation for the years of their lives taken away from them by the American justice system. The effects of wrongful imprisonment on each of these individuals will follow them for the remainder of their lives. Currently, 34 states and the District of Columbia have different statutes specifying how much compensation can be granted. There is also a federal statute that allocates up to $50,000 per year of imprisonment for exonerees. In Illinois, where Juan Johnson is from, there is a statute, but compensation can actually be pursued through three methods: state statutes, common law, or a private bill. In states without statute, a civil lawsuit could be brought for violation of constitutional rights. Under the Illinois statute, the Court of Claims decides whether exonerees are eligible for compensation by looking at whether they received a pardon for innocence. Juan Johnson was not pardoned by the governor and thus was not eligible for compensation under the statute. He pursued a civil trial instead. Juan sued both the city of Chicago and an officer involved in his arrest for compensatory and punitive damages. Juan sued under the federal and state law for violation of due process rights, false arrest, malicious prosecution, and outrageous infliction of emotional distress. Juan was awarded $21 million in compensatory damages from the city of Chicago, which was reduced to $16.4 million on settlement to an appeal. As demonstrated by Juan Johnson's story, there are a number of federal civil rights or state tort claims that can be brought against the state for compensation. However, there are many challenges. For example, bringing claims for damages based on legal process issues such as false arrest and false imprisonment are unlikely to yield much compensation. The Supreme Court ruled in Wallace v. Cato that statute of limitations is based off of state tort claims, which generally begin running when false imprisonment occurred, which can bar many wrongfully convicted from ever filing a claim. And even if they can validly file a claim, the damages are limited to the period of detention prior to when the legal process issues arose. This means that plaintiffs cannot be compensated for time spent in prison if, for example, an arrest was made without probable cause, which eventually leads to a conviction. But when claims are successful, jury verdicts can often be quite significant. From 2012 to 2015, the city of Chicago paid out over $210 million in police misconduct cases. So where does all this money come from? The answer? The taxpayers. During this time, $69 million of the city budget was allocated to police misconduct lawsuits and settlements. But this still leaves $140 million to cover. So where does the rest of the money come from? The city borrows high-interest loans. In 2014 alone, the city borrowed $198 million to pay for lawsuit settlements and outside counsel, used for both police and non-police lawsuits. This covered the budget gap for 2 years, but taxpayers will be left paying back this debt for the next 30 years, adding $335 million in total interest costs by the time the loan is fully paid off. Aside from the financial aspect of compensation, there is the question of liability. Who is responsible for these mistakes? As of now, prosecutors have absolute immunity, meaning they cannot face lawsuits in their capacity as prosecutors, and police officers have qualified immunity, meaning they can't be sued barring a constitutional violation. As you can see, there are many arguments for and against absolute and qualified immunity. With absolute immunity, prosecutors are incentivized to increase the number of convictions. Police officers' qualified immunity requires claims to meet such a high standard that it essentially functions as absolute immunity. How does this relate to Juan's case? When he was retried and acquitted, witnesses testified that Detective Guevara intimidated them into saying Johnson was the murderer.
Do you fear prosecution for violation of federal, civil rights, criminal laws?
On the advice of my attorney, I assert my Fifth Amendment rights.
Is the reason you are invoking the Fifth Amendment in response to my question because answering the question will incriminate you?
On the advice of my attorney, I assert my Fifth Amendment rights.
Because of repeated allegations regarding Guevara's conduct, all 56 of his defendants are being reevaluated, with repeated allegations of witness tampering, physical beating, and manipulation for false confession.
Guevara didn't like you, or if he was looking for you, chances are you were gonna be sent to prison. I was wrongfully convicted.
Most of those wrongfully convicted due to Detective Guevara's actions are Latino, Black, or both.
Montanez's suit claims Guevara preyed on young Latino men as the officer looked to close unsolved cases by framing them.
On the advice of my attorney, I assert my Fifth Amendment rights.
This disparity also shows how racial bias shapes wrongful convictions, which also has serious consequences for compensation. This effect is especially pronounced in Illinois, where Juan Johnson was convicted. In Illinois, there has been 227 exonerations. 2/3 of that number, 152 people, were Black. But the Black population of Illinois is only around 14.6% of the total state population. Another 40 were Hispanic. So with all of these factors in play for wrongful convictions, what is the fair result? These are photos of Juan Johnson. He will never be able to get back the years he lost in prison. And one purpose of compensation is to provide support for exonerees. The trial jury awarded Juan $2 million for every year he spent in prison. This is much more than compensation statutes provide. But another reason for compensation might be to hold public officials accountable, or to disincentivize them for committing the same errors again. Here, the effects of cases like Juan Johnson's are ambivalent. Between immunity and insurance, state law enforcement agencies may not have to change their behavior or pay damages, and more people may go to prison for crimes they did not commit.